and Mary were growing up together, and they were in love. At 6 years old, they promised each other that when they got old enough, they would marry. However, when they got old enough, Mary's father was an architect making plenty of money. Joseph was a poor carpenter. And in the Muslim world in those days, and in most real high civilization in these days, women are not allowed to marry a man that can't at least take care of them in the manner in which they are accustomed. You don't marry her to give her less. You marry her to give her more. You don't marry her to bring her down. You marry her to lift her up. So that it was the law in the Muslim world that you could not, a poor man couldn't marry a girl from a rich family, so she's got to be miserable because she's used to a better life. So for that reason, Mary's mother said, no, Joe, you got to do something different here. So they were parted. Joseph married another woman. They had 6 children. Read your Bible. You'll see Jesus' brothers and sisters. 2 of his brothers became his disciples. Poor Mary never, because she did not have her first love, she never married anybody else. But there came a time when her father had to leave the city. There were a lot of white folks that come into the area at that time. That's right. And they got a bad habit, especially where black women are concerned. Mary was a black Egyptian. Okay? That's why they went to Egypt. We'll get to that in a little while. Now, the father had noticed how the neighborhood had changed. So he wasn't going to leave his daughter. You know, there goes the neighborhood. All these white folks come in. So he was a little leery about leaving his daughter unattended. But he had to go. Had to go deal with something about the building of a mosque. So he told her, says, here's what you do. No, you got to go out and feed the animals and everything. He gave her a goat's beard and some of his clothes and said, wait till it's dusk, and then when you go out, wear my clothes, wear this beard, people will think it's me and won't know I'm gone, and you can feed the flock. She said, okay. So Daddy left. A sudden dust storm came up. Fierce dust storm, dark as night, and she grew so afraid. And in her fear, she called out to her first love, Joseph. And he heard her. He said, what? That's right. She called out to him, and he heard it. They didn't have no telephone. Where do you think the idea for the telephone came from? Where do you think clocks came from? Where do you think automobiles? Just study, that's a good study. Study an automobile. How did they get the idea to make that? They studied the human body. What makes you move? You take in food, which is fuel, your body burns it. The energy is used to keep you moving and the waste is destroyed. So that's what happens with the internal combustion engine. They copied it. How'd they learn to make a telescope? They studied your eyes. They learned, brothers and sisters, they made television because they know from their own study of history that there were times when we wanted to see each other, not just talk to each other. We wanted to see each other. We could make each other crystallize right in front of our very faces. They know that. That's the hidden wisdom that they have back in these lodges and all that sort of stuff, that they pay all that big money, which we'll get to a little later. Those are the hidden secrets. What would even make a man talk about going out in space if he didn't know that folks had already been out in space? This man is not an inventor. This man is a copycat. So she called Joseph. Joseph came to her. And when she told him, the preparations her father had made and everything, he said, that's all right. You go out with me, and they'll think I'm your father, and then that'll solidify. They'll see both of us, so forth. So he did that. The dust storm lasted 3 days, and they were there together alone for 3 days. But neither one of them funny. So something happened in 3 days. They didn't mean for it to. That was not their intention, but that's the way it was, as Walter Cronkite would say. So when he got ready to go back home, Mary, you know how y'all always outthink us. Mary said, what you going to tell your wife? Where you going to say you've been? Joseph said, I'll tell her I was over building a house for an infidel. Still, y'all got it. We couldn't make it without you. Mary said, oh, yeah? What happens when she asks you, where's the money? I hadn't thought of that. So Mary gave him some money to make his story stand up. So Joseph went on back home to his wife. Father came home, Mary's father came home, everything going fine. All of a sudden, a few months later, Mary started picking up a little weight. Pops looked at her. Getting a little fat, girl. She said, yeah, I guess it must be what I'm eating. Daddy said, you must be eating plenty. This is the exact quote. You must be eating plenty. So after a while, it became obvious. Meantime, Joseph knows it too. So Joseph is scared, literally to death. The father is worried to death, almost to death, because they know the law of Islam. Adultery, fornication, death. And it is the duty, when a woman commits adultery or fornication, the job of killing her goes to the father, and if the father's not present, it goes to her oldest brother. So her father got so sick he had to go to bed. He just got deathly ill thinking of his only daughter. He loved her, that he was going to have to kill her. Joseph, meanwhile, knew that when the truth got out and they found out who the father was, he had to go too. He's walking down the street worried, and an old prophetess saw him and stopped him and said, Joseph, said, don't be worried. You have been blessed. The child that you have fathered is to be the last prophet to the Jews, and you are to be blessed for that. He said, So he went and told Mary's father the same thing. So Mary's father was somewhat relieved, but they still knew that, who would believe them. So he had the father to fix one of the ox stalls and stuff straw around it, and he put Mary in there so that nobody would see her. And Joseph attended to her, brought her food and took care of her and delivered the baby and all, because in the predominantly Muslim world, boys and girls are taught at a very young age how to take care of any pregnant woman, how to do everything. Doctors are for sick people. You don't waste no money on no doctors to deliver a baby when that's a natural act of God. Doctors are for sick people. When you get sick, call a doctor. You're going to have a baby, have your baby. Now, we're not saying do that now. I'm talking about where you train and in the Nation of Islam, we usually seek out a midwife. Understand? One day we'll have doctors just for somebody slip and break their leg or something like that, but you're not going to be going around delivering babies and stuff like that. That's not sickness. You go to school all that time, spend all that money in med school to take care of something, and baby gonna come whether you deliver it or not. But anyway, I digress. So when the baby was born, and after, sufficient time, Joseph put Mary and the baby on a fast camel and sent them to Egypt.